Hi, I'm GM Matthew Sadler.
And I'm WIM Natasha Regan. Welcome to this video that's part of our series of videos that support our Game Changer book. This video is the second in our series of middle game videos. In it, we look at an AlphaZero game and we look at AlphaZero's attacking strategy. AlphaZero seems to be able to generate attack from just about any position. This video is filmed in memory of my teammate Peter Pubalasingham. He was a popular and kind member of the Barbican team, and he died at the tragically young age of 27. In our featured game in this video, AlphaZero plays a spectacular bishop move, and this reminded me of a game that Peter had played, one of his best ever wins, and we'll show you that soon.
So this is the game. It's a game between Jorge Corri as white. He was 2480 in IM at the time, but he's now a 2650 plus GM, so a very strong player. And Peter, and it was played in a French Open in 2010. It was a G3 Grunfeld, which is one of Corri's favourite openings as white. And it's Black's 20th move, and Black was to play here. And here Peter played a very spectacular move. He played the move Bishop D1, moving the bishop to the back rank, completely unexpected. The idea is that after Rook takes D1, Black just plays C2 and wins the exchange. So White is unable to capture the bishop, and so played Rook B4. But after C2, obviously this is this is a very big gain for Black. That C pawn has advanced to the 7th rank, just one square away from queening, and of course the Rook on C1 is terribly tied down. In the rest of the game, that was nicely played, I have to say. Black tried very, very hard to open lines to try and exploit the lack of mobility of that Rook on C1. First of all, this move G5 activates the dark squared bishop, gets rid of that white pawn barrier in the centre, and then this lovely move F5, just opening up lines and trying to get at White's back rank.
And you can see Peter liked to play an attacking game. With his modest personality, you wouldn't necessarily think that he would come up with these moves, but he always played an exciting game.
Yeah, it's a very aggressive strategy. And now the bishop moves back to F3, and this actually facilitates a very strong idea, which is to play the Rook to D4 and then Rook to D1 check. And in this position, White resigned. Because after Rook takes D1, C takes D1 is queen, and checkmate as well. So a gorgeous game, actually, and an absolutely great move, bishop to D1, putting the bishop to the back rank. And well, when you see our featured game in the next little video, I think you'll understand why Natasha thought of this game. See you around. Right, time to dive into this game, AlphaZero against Stockfish. Let's have a look. So the game started D4. This is a pretty common opening between AlphaZero and Stockfish. Stockfish plays the semi-Slav, and AlphaZero offers the Botvinnik system, which is one of the sharpest and most theoretical lines in modern theory.
The game itself is one of the lesser known AlphaZero games, and it was one of the 210 games that were released in December. That's
right. Actually, it's a game that actually thought about including, but didn't in the end. But we had plenty of analysis of it, so it's great to show this one to you. So Stockfish played Bishop E7, which is one of the weighted answers, which just leads it back into a pretty solid classical Queen's Gambit declined type of position. So E3, castles, and now AlphaZero played C takes D5, which is one of its favourite strategies, fixing the centre and focusing play on the wings.
Now if Black takes back with the E pawn, E takes D5, then we're into quite a familiar position with a Carlsbad pawn structure. And we're planning to do a video on the Carlsbad at a later date.
Yeah, it's one of the big things that we talked about in our book Chess for Life, when we looked at the games of the English Grandmaster Keith Arkle, who's a very big exponent of these positions. Actually, what Stockfish does in this position is it plays an unusual decision, though not necessarily a bad one. It takes with a c pawn on d5. And this leads to exchange Slav types of positions, where, white should be a little bit better here because its queen's bishop is outside the pawn chain and the light squared bishop, the queen's bishop for black, is inside the pawn chain. So that's a little bit of an advantage for white, but black is very solid all the same. So both sides continue to develop quite normally. b6 castles, bishop b7, h3. Rook c8 and bishop g3. And I think that here both sides are pretty, or white at least is ready for action. I think the knight on f3 is going to come into e5, and then white's going to follow up with f4 and try and expand on the kingside, get a kingside attack going. So Stockfish takes interesting decision, quite a radical decision, and decides to change the pawn structure and create some targets on the white queen side. So it's not waiting for AlphaZero to build up its position. It's taking some slightly risky action in order to create weaknesses on the side where it should be attacking, on the queen side. So played knight b4 and then knight e4, just exploiting the fact that the black's threatening knight takes g3 here, which would cause some weaknesses in the white king side, although it would also open the f-file against the black king side. But AlphaZero took a different decision, played bishop f4, and after knight c3, rook c3, takes, knight c6, we reached a very interesting position. As you can see, Stockfish has been quite successful in creating a weakness on the queen side. There's that pawn on c3, backward on the half-open c-file, and there's also a lovely outpost on c4 for a black knight, for example. However, black has wasted quite a bit of time with this maneuver, knight b4 back to c6, AlphaZero exploits that, and also the fact that a defensive piece for black, the king's knight, the knight on f6, has been exchanged to tease out a few weaknesses from black. It plays queen d3, threatening queen h7 checkmate, and
Stockfish saw that.
Stockfish saw that, of course. So g6 allows bishop takes 8. Oops, wrong piece. Bishop takes h6, winning a pawn. So Stockfish has to play f5. Actually, not a bad move. Because it also clamps down on a possible e3 to e4 break, but it does, of course, weaken the e5 square. So now AlphaZero takes a very interesting decision, a very sharp decision, and plays this move g4. So this pawn move strikes at the f5 pawn, and of course, what white is looking for is to try and open up the b1 h7 diagonal and get a queen and bishop battery along there. However, Stockfish is certainly not stuck for counterplay, and played this very interesting move, queen e7. Now the point about it is that although AlphaZero's got some pretty good control of the centre, with a bishop on f4, a knight on f3, and a pawn on d4, that control is not absolute. And what we can see is that Stockfish is aiming for the e5 break in the centre, which would really disrupt white's operations. So, for example, gf, even e5 could be considered here. Another idea would also be to play e takes f5, bishop f5 and bishop d4, for example, just winning back the pawn. So tactically for the moment, things are hanging together. What AlphaZero wants to try and force black to take on g4. So it played a very interesting move, queen b5. This move, queen b5, dissuades black from playing e6 to e5 by attacking the pawn on d5. It just puts pressure on the black centre from an unusual angle. And actually, now g takes f5 could be a threat because, after e takes f5, we could take the pawn on d5 with check. Black has a number of possibilities here, but Stockfish chose to fight fire with fire, and played this very sharp idea: knight a5, seemingly just leaving the pawn on f5 on prise, but then it followed up with knight c4.
Now that queen can't easily get back to the kingside.
No, that's right. Actually, by playing this pawn sacrifice, Stockfish has cut off AlphaZero's queen from the kingside, which means that a move like f takes e6, queen takes e6, for example, suddenly looks a bit dangerous for white because these kingside light squares are dangerous. And for example, after a move like king h2, a move like bishop c8, attacking the pawn on h3 would be very difficult for white to handle. But yeah, AlphaZero has got its own ideas. The one thing it's got to watch out for as well is this move knight a3, which would then swap off white's light squared bishop, which would also make it harder to attack along the b1 h7 diagonal. So AlphaZero is attacking, trying to open lines, but Stockfish is giving as good as it gets. But AlphaZero played king h2.
And this is a maneuver we've seen in a number of games of AlphaZero. So getting its king onto the h file and leaving that open g file for the rook to enter.
Yes, we actually have a number of games in our book, Game Changer, that sort of in which AlphaZero uses king h2 as a way to get its pieces active, either to activate a rook on the h file, getting the rook behind the king, bringing the rook to the g file, or one time, even allowing a knight to go there. There's some great games, you should really check those out. In this case, king h2 is just allowing a rook onto the g file. And so Stockfish took back on f5, and then rook g1, threatening bishop takes h6. Now Stockfish, you think at some stage Stockfish might start thinking about defending passively, but here it comes up with a fantastic defensive maneuver. And funnily enough, it's also the maneuver that AlphaZero plays. When I checked the game with AlphaZero, it was suggesting the exact line that Stockfish played. And to be honest, that doesn't surprise me because this sort of active defense, it's very AlphaZero-like. Stockfish played king h8, seemingly just giving away this pawn on f5. And they came up with this incredible idea, g5 and h5. Now, one of the basic rules of defense is that you don't move pawns in front of your own king. You don't move pawns on the wing where you're weaker. You try and force the opponent to come to you, but this is counterattack on a grand scale. Actually, the big idea is that Black wants to play h5 to h4 when this bishop on g3 is missing a lot of squares. And of course, the bishop on f5 and the knight on f3 are a little vulnerable. They're both loose on the f file. So, but AlphaZero, sees pretty early a quite incredible tactic. Really amazing. So plays queen b1, getting its queen back into play. Stockfish went bishop g7, opening up the attack of the rook on f8 on that bishop on f5. So it looks as if White's going to have to to start protecting pieces and maybe sound the retreat. But here, AlphaZero played a move that I think you'll spot if you think back to our introduction and the game of Peters that we featured. It played this move, bishop b8.
This is just an incredible and unexpected move. And you can see why it reminded me of Peter's bishop d1 from his game against Corey. An unprotected bishop put straight onto the back rank.
Exactly. Now, the idea of this move, in this case, is to uncover the attack of the rook on g5. So after rook b8, White plays rook takes g5. And, for example, after a move like knight d6, we bring the pieces in like this, and there's a huge amount of threats. Bishop to e6 check is a really big threat, followed by queen h7 or queen g6. It's incredibly dangerous. However, Yeah, Stockfish wouldn't be Stockfish if he didn't find an amazing defence. G4 was actually my idea, the first thing that occurred to me, just trying to disrupt things a little bit. And the idea is if H takes G4, then Rook takes B8, and you've blocked the G file. AlphaZero was intending simply Bishop F4, and after G takes F3, Rook G5. And actually, my engines are not particularly impressed when they start looking at this move, but give them enough time and they start being pretty impressed. The idea simply is that White's going to try and take this pawn on H5, bring the queen round to G1, and it's very, very hard for Black to get free. And of course, because the White king's nice, safely tucked away there, White can just keep on attacking, and Black doesn't really have a way to get back at the White position. But Stockfish finds an even nicer defence, and it's this move Queen E8. So Stockfish's idea, in actual fact, is that this bishop really is essentially trapped, because if you go Bishop C7, then Queen F7 forks these two loose bishops. And the idea is that Stockfish wants to keep its rook defending the kingside, so rook on the F file, and it wants to take the bishop with the queen with check. So it's just going to gain an awful lot of time for its defence. I mean, it's tactics on a great scale. Now another unusual point. I mean, the intuitive move here is to play the move King H1, because you keep the G file free for the queen, so the queen can come to G1 after. And funnily enough, that intuitive move is the move that AlphaZero really considers as first, and considers for a long time. There's a slight problem, is that if you try and play the attack in a normal way, you end up having some problems because the F2 square is undefended. And just in one specific tactical way, you actually see this problem. Bishop G6, Rook F2, and after the move Queen D1, we have this move Knight F5, uncovering the attack of the Queen on H2. And if I'm not wrong, I think the correct best play was to play Knight F3, Rook F1, Knight G1, Rook F2 with a draw by repetition. I think that was best play. All pretty wild. So for that reason, AlphaZero ends up playing the very precisely calculated King G1, just defending F2 and avoiding those lines. But it does mean that White's attack is slightly slower, because obviously the queen can't come to G1. But there's another danger, in actual fact. It's not just G1 where the queen can come. The queen can come to D1 later. And so here, Stockfish, AlphaZero plays Bishop G6, and the next move is going to be Queen D1 to H5. Very, very dangerous. But here Stockfish plays an absolutely great move. It plays the move Queen A4, covering this D1 square. Amazing. The thing is something that Stockfish does an awful lot. It's willing to move its queen, away from the king in order to annoy or to harry or to prevent stuff in the opponent's wing, because it knows that the queen can get back very quickly for defence. Whereas its other pieces, well, it likes to try and keep those close to the king, because it always takes longer to get a bishop back or a knight back. I mean, it's beautiful defence, and well, if you see our book Game Changer, you're going to find we do an awful lot of quite detailed analysis of how Stockfish defends, which I think is very, very instructive. I mean, certainly I think I learned a lot from that. These positions are not easy for White to play to attack. They're even more difficult for Black to defend. But here, well, we see some stunning play coming up. So King H1 is AlphaZero's idea, and the point is that if Black now plays Rook F2, then Queen G1 is incredibly strong. After a move like Queen takes A2, Rook H5, there's quite an unusual way of prosecuting the attack. is just rook f5 check, swapping off the rooks. And after rook f5, knight f5, a move like bishop f6 is met by the rather annoying queen g8 checkmate.
So you can see again the theme of exchanging black's most active piece.
That's right. You exchange black's most active piece and just leave him with with targets. In actual fact, in the end. So in this case, the counterattack against f2 is not good, and white is now going to play queen g1. So how does black defend? Well, what Stockfish does is this amazing idea, and the only reason for doing this is to open up the white king and give yourself extra chances for counterattack. And I was very proud, in actual fact, that I spotted what the main idea was, but it did take me a little while, because I thought that bishop f5 was going to be exceedingly strong. Attacking the bishop on h3, and after bishop f5, we go knight takes f5. And white's actually got a very strong threat here, quite apart from taking the knight on g7. It's to take the pawn on h5 with check, and then to play queen g7 checkmate. But black plays this move, queen e8.
The queen comes back very quickly.
Exactly. Just it's been on the side, stop queen d1. At the last moment, last gasp, the queen comes back to defend. There's two very unpleasant points to this. The first is that rook h5 check is met by queen h5 check. So white's got no time to play queen g7. If I play a move like rook g7, then actually simply rook f5 is just good. And if I play knight g7, which looks very, very strong, then there's this move queen e4 check. And the key point is that you'd like to play a move like king h2, for example. But here, remember that move bishop takes h3 that removed a pawn on h4? A move a pawn on h3. Queen h4 check is now possible. And, well, after king g2, then queen g5 wins the house and black wins. Amazing, amazing. And as I said, very typical of Stockfish. And, well, we've got a big section in our book about defense and how Stockfish defends that, I mean, I think it's a gorgeous chapter. So, really encourage you to read that. I think it can help everyone a lot. But that's the move bishop f5, which doesn't actually lead to a win. Of course, AlphaZero saw that, and it carried on its attack in a different way, with rook h5 check, bishop h7, rook g5. I mean, AlphaZero here is carrying on its attack by making a lot of forcing moves, attacking pieces. So there's no time for Stockfish to even bring back his queen. Bishop h6 and rook d5. So the point of attacking that bishop on g7 was, as we saw in another variation, to free the path of the queen to g8. King e7, another gorgeous move from Stockfish. I mean, it is just amazing at keeping things together. Queen g3 from AlphaZero, attacking the bishop on h3, eyeing that square on c7 as an invasion square. Queen c6 from Stockfish, attacking the rook on d5, covering c6. Bishop e4, setting up a huge discovered attack. Rook e5 check is the threat, winning the queen. Bishop e6, quite amazing. Attacking the rook and also covering that attack. I mean, it looks as if, is Stockfish managing to regroup? But there's always, when AlphaZero is involved, there's always fresh stuff you can throw onto the fire. Knight g6 check, attacking the king. Rook g6, queen h4 check. Rook f6, rook h5. The tactics just keep on coming. So there's an attack of the bishop on the queen, and white's also threatening just to take on h6, get one of the pieces back, and attack the rook on f6, which will be difficult to defend. So Stockfish, little intermediate move, disruptive. That's the idea. White is going to take back the bishop, but not taking it back on h6, taking it back on g5. Queen d6, rook g6, bishop f7, rook h6. So you can see that white's a little bit slower to get that desired structure up. And now we reach one of these positions that actually you see quite often in some of these incredibly intricate but beautiful attacking games between AlphaZero and Stockfish. We actually end up in some sort of equilibrium where AlphaZero's got a great initiative and enough for the piece, but not quite enough to make any more of it. And the game actually continued in the following way. Bishop takes h2, typical Stockfish, you know, defending and grabbing a pawn at the same time. So AlphaZero actually just playing around for now, and we actually end up in a situation where both sides end up repeating moves. Queen g3 is always met by queen c7, and queen g5 check is always met by queen e7. Well, AlphaZero and Stockfish both always do everything they can to spin out these games for as long as possible, trying all sorts of combinations of the queen. But this move was drawn about 20 moves later after lots of repetitions like this. I mean, I hope you enjoyed that game too. I mean, I thought it was a phenomenal game, and it's particularly nice, you know, that what Natasha spotted, that you know, the similarity of this move, bishop b8 with the bishop d1 in Peter's game. But I thought it was also, you know, a very beautiful example of how AlphaZero can just start up an attack, you know, even from nowhere, and you know, taking quite big risks, and then you get this fantastic defense from Stockfish trying to counter it, sacrificing pawns, attacking even on the wing where AlphaZero is trying to attack. But I think, you know, one of the things that you do have to highlight that's always I think key to AlphaZero's attacks is that even its king is always that little bit safer than Stockfish's king, and that always enables it to keep on attacking even when it's material down. Because if your own king is safe and the opponent can't get at it, he's always going to have to respond to your threats rather than the other way around. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that game, and yeah, keep watching for more of our videos. We've got lots to tell, and we just keep on posting them. So subscribe to our channel and keep watching. Thanks very much for watching.